students, in the subject Indian history, in the chapter Guptas, today in part 3, we are going to discuss about the golden age of Guptas. Gupta period has a unique position in Indian history. Guptan rulers not only carved an extensive empire but also provided an efficient system of administration which brought peace, prosperity to the people. As a result, princes and rich diverted their part of income to support those who were involved in the development of art and literature. This resulted in an outstanding literature. This resulted in the production of outstanding literature, and also it had a tremendous development in art. Thus, Guptan age has attained the epithet the golden age of Indian history. The Gupta period from 320 CE to 480 CE, covering the period of Chandragupta I, Samudragupta, Chandragupta II alias Chandragupta Vikramaditya, Kumaragupta and Skandagupta, is known as the golden age of ancient India. Few scholars even call this period as the period of Renaissance. So, in the Guptan period, every aspect of human life, whether it is social, political, cultural, economic and religious, reached the highest watermark. This period witnessed the all-round development of culture, particularly in the field of literature, science, arts, architecture, sculpture and paintings. So, the Guptan age is compared, the European writers used to compare Guptan age with that of the age of Augustus Caesar of Rome and Pericles in Greece and Queen Elizabeth in England. Dr. V. A. Smith found the Guptan age, the glories of Queen Elizabeth of England, 16th century CE. This period, 16th century CE, is the greatest period for the English literature and music. So also Guptans saw the glory of Sanskrit literature with Kalidasa, the poet and dramatist of Guptan period, who is called as the Shakespeare of India. In Elizabethan period, Shakespeare was the product of that period. In Guptan period, Kalidasa is the Shakespeare of India. So, this period is also compared with the classical period. It is also known as the classical period in India. The classical period is the period of Pericles, 5th century BC, in the sense in which the Pericles period has got all-round development in the field of architecture, art and literature. Pericles was the greatest ruler of Greece, who ruled from 490 to 299 BC. In his period, Greek culture reached its zenith. So, it is always compared with Augustus Caesar's period in Rome, Pericles in Greece and Queen Elizabeth period in England. So, now let us go in detail about the points which supports the epithet golden age for Gupta period. The first point being efficient administration. So, government was very efficient and it looked after the people very well. It looked after the welfare of the people and people enjoyed peace and prosperity. Fahian, a Chinese scholar, in his book Goki, Record of Buddhist Kingdom, he characterizes Gupta administration as mild and benevolent. People enjoyed large degree of personal freedom. There were no restrictions in their movement. and also there were no fear of thieves, and roads were kept safe for travelers, and people were not burdened with heavy tax. And also, as Fahian quotes, in this period is better than that of Mauryan period because it was so liberal, the administration was so liberal. So next point in defending the Golden Age epithet is economic prosperity. Guptan rulers encouraged agriculture, industries such as silk, cotton textiles, mining for metals, mining for gems, and commerce and trade, that is internal as well as external trade. Did you remember Chandragupta II invaded West India and destroyed the Shakas, and he captured the three important seaports, Sopara, Cambay and Bruch. It led to the trade with the external world, that is Western world, especially Roman Empire, and also internal trade happened when Chandragupta II converted Ujjain as the commercial capital. It gave a great fillip to the internal trade, and also some crafts like jewelry making, ivory carving also developed during this period. So the people economically sound. Next point in defending this quote Golden Age is high sense of values. Here the observation of Fahian are worth narrating in this context. So people are very happy, theft is unknown, and gold left on the road could be recovered and nobody could touch it. So what a nice comment he has given, a foreigner, about the Indian administration. So why? People led a life in accordance with the four principles, that is dharma, righteousness, artha, the wealth, kama, the enjoyment, and moksha, liberation. The next point we are going to deal with is revival of Hinduism. Guptan age may be called as an age of Hindu Renaissance. Yes, even the kings are followers of Hinduism. They were staunch worshippers of Vishnu. Hinduism became the state religion of Guptas, hence. So the Guptan period marked a synthesis between the old and the new ideas. That is how this old Brahminical faith was molded into a shape of Hinduism we find today, and the old gods which we practiced during the Vedic period. What are the gods? Varuna, Indra, and Varuna, Indra, they receded back, and the new gods like Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva came to the forefront. And worship of images became very popular, and beautiful temples of Hindu gods, especially Shiva and Vishnu, were built. Vedic rites and sacrifices, that is yajna, like Ashwamedha yajna, Rajasuya yajna, Putra Kameshti yajna, that yajnas were performed by the kings, Guptan kings, with so much enthusiasm and with all splendor. And another important feature of this religious life of Guptans is Bhakti cult. So, importance of Bhakti cult. In addition to following the Vedic rites, rituals, and leading a religious life, they developed Bhakti, which is the love for God. Even the Gupta king, Samudragupta, got the title Parama Bhagavata, which indicates he had great devotion to Lord Vishnu. So when we talk about the religious tolerance, a very important point which supports the epithet Golden Age. The rulers were very liberal in their religious outlook. Their interest in Hinduism, their religion, never made them religious fanatics. Very great thing that is. And you all know that this Samudragupta permitted Ceylonese king to construct construct a monastery in Bodh Gaya for the Ceylonese pilgrimage, and also Samudragupta sent a statue of Buddha made of gold and silver studded with gems to this monastery as a gift. They employed learned Buddhist scholars in the position of honor. Yes, Asanga, the great Buddhist philosopher, and Vasubandhu were among several literary luminaries in the court of Samudragupta. 2 Jain councils were held. So for Jainism they have done 2 Jain councils. Conferences were held at Mathura and Vallabhi in 313 CE and 453 CE. And the scholars of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, they held religious debates and philosophical discussion. It is a sight to see. And there was absolutely no religious discrimination in the Guptan period. So now let us move on to the development that has taken place in education, which supports the epithet Golden Age for Gupta period. India made a phenomenal progress in the field of education and learning. Apart from that network of patashalas and temple schools, which is called viharas, several centers of higher learning started at Nalanda, Takshashila, Saranath, Ajanta and Ujjain assumed a worldwide importance. Different centers of higher learning, now called universities, specialized in particular field were set up. Nalanda, being the biggest of all, handled all kinds of branches. The specialized institution was set up in so many places. Nalanda is the biggest and it is head of that. It has all branches of, it headed all branches of knowledge, but Takshashila was specialized in the field of medicine. Ajanta was specialized in the field of art and architecture. Saranath was specialized in the field of philosophy and religion. Ujjain specialized in the field of astronomy. And Pataliputra and Vallabhi, they became the great centers of education. Thus, India had become the great centers for education. So, we could see the Nalanda University. The foreigners who visited India, they proudly called themselves as India returned those days. What a nice comment they have given. And the Guptan age, we have that the schools and the colleges, the subjects taught were Puranas, literature, philosophy, arithmetic, astrology and science. The rulers and the rich people freely gave donations in cash, land or kind to educational institutions. So let us move on to the next point which supports the Golden Age title is revival of Sanskrit literature. Sanskrit received encouragement and patronage in the hands of Guptan kings. Nagari script had evolved from the Brahmi script and numerous works in classical Sanskrit came to be written in the form of epics, lyrics, dramas and prose. The best of Sanskrit literature, whatever literature we have now in Sanskrit, the best of Sanskrit literature came from one and only Guptan period. And the Sanskrit is not only recognized as the court language of Guptans, but also it became the literary language of North India. The knowledge of Sanskrit became the symbol of culture. So it is said that up to 4th century CE, all epigraphs, inscriptions were composed in Prakrit. And in Guptan period only, inscriptions and coins were engraved in Sanskrit because the official language is Sanskrit. And also it is a symbol of culture. So they wanted to show that the culture is a cultured one, that Guptan period is a cultured one. And Buddhist philosophers like Vasubandhu, so many Buddhist philosophers, they started to write their religious scriptures in Sanskrit. And also Jain Munis, who are used to Prakrit and Pali in writing their religious scriptures, they moved to Sanskrit in accordance to the new trend. And Kalidasa, the great poet and dramatist, Vishakadatta, Sudraka, Harisena, the composer of Allahabad pillar inscription, Bharavi and Bhasha, he wrote 16 plays, wrote monumental works in Sanskrit. Vishakadatta, we have known about the political dramas he have written, Mudra Rakshasa and Devi Chandragupta. So next we move on to the Navaratnas. So Guptan period is famous for Navaratnas, or the 9 gems. 9 talented men who excelled in different fields adorned the court of Guptas as 9 jewels. They were Kalidasa, the poet and the dramatist who wrote Shakuntala. It's a great drama. It is one of the best, one among the 100 best books of the world. And Amara Simha is a lexicographer. He wrote Amara Kosha, the dictionary, Sanskrit dictionary. And Vararuchi, the grammarian, he wrote Vyakarana. Gatakarpara, the poet, he wrote Gatakarpara Kavya. It is an epic. Dhanvantri, the father, one who was known as the father of Indian medicine, the physician, he wrote Ayurveda Nigantu, about Indian medicine called Ayurveda. And Varaha Mihira, the great astronomer, who wrote Brihat Samhite. And Shapanaka, another astronomer, who wrote Jyotisha Shastra. Vetala Bhatta, the magician, who wrote Mantra Sastra. Shanku, the architect, who wrote a book on Shilpa Sastra, about the sculpture. So he is our great Mahakavi Kalidasa. He, one of the important, greatest Sanskrit poet of Guptan period, and he lived during the period of Samudragupta II, Samudragupta Vikramaditya and his son Kumaragupta. Actually, we don't have any reference about his early age, but a story goes like this. He was a shepherd. He belonged to the shepherd caste, and he was illiterate at first, and he got married to a princess because of a cunning minister. And after that, due to the grace of goddess Kali, he became a poet. So Kalidasa is the greatest Sanskrit poet of all times. He wrote 3 dramas, Abhignada Shakuntala, Malavika Agnimutra and Vikramorvishiya, 2 epic poems, Kumara Sambhava and Raghuvamsha, and 2 lyrical poems, Ritu Samhara and Meghaduta. Among all these his works, Shakuntala is a masterpiece. This book is one among the 100 best books of the world. Actually, it is said that when a foreign scholar read the description of Shakuntala, Dushyanta meeting his son Bharata in the book Abhignada Shakuntala, he went into ecstasy, and he carried the Abhignada Shakuntala book on his head and danced. So that was a lucid narration of our Kalidasa. So let us move into the important scholars of this Guptan age. Sudraka, he wrote Mirichakatika. This Mirichakatika tells about the society of Guptans. And Bharavi, he wrote Kiratarjuniyam. This epic tells about the conflict between the Shiva and Arjuna. Dandi wrote Dashakumara Saritra and Kavya Darsha. Vishakadatta, he wrote 2 political dramas, Mudra Rakshasa and Devi Chandraguptam. And it tells about the establishment of Nanda dynasty, the political revolution that happened in Magadha and which led to the establishment of Nanda dynasty, and Vishnu Sharma, who wrote the famous Panchatantra stories, and Charaka wrote Charaka Samhite. So revival of religious literature. With the revival of Hinduism, even the religious literature gave a impetus. The Puranas in the present form were composed. Bhagavad Gita was also composed. Renowned Buddhist scholars like Asanga and Vasubandhu wrote their scholarly works. Vasubandhu and Asanga, two brothers. Asanga wrote Yogachara Bhumi Shastra, and he propounded a new philosophy called Yogachara School of Philosophy. And Vasubandhu, who is the younger brother of Asanga, who wrote, he is an authority of Mahayana as well as Hinayana's form of sect of Buddhism. He wrote Mahayana Sutra Alankara for Mahayanism and Abhidhamma Kosa for Hinayanism. And Hitobadesha, meaning beneficial advice, was also written. This Hitopatesha consists of fables with animal and human characters. It incorporates worldly wisdom and advice on political affairs in a simple language. So this book Hitopadesha has been widely translated. And in the science and technology, the progress that has happened in science and technology during the Guptan period, which supports this statement, Golden Age, is India witnessed a brilliant activity in the sphere of mathematics, science, astronomy, medicine and metallurgy. Aryabhatta, the great mathematician and astronomer, who studied in the Nalanda University, and the Guptan ruler Buddha Gupta appointed him as the head of the Nalanda University at the age of 23, just 23, and he is the first astronomer who declared in his book Surya Siddhanta that Earth is round, it revolves round its axis, and it also describes the cause of lunar and solar eclipse. The solar eclipse is not because of the Rahu eating the sun, it is because of the shadow of the earth. And also he declared that moon is dark and it shines because of sunlight, and he gave value to the pi, that is 3.1416, which is very much close to the modern terminology, is 3.14159. And he, in his book Aryabhatiya, describes about the decimal system. Another important, this is an epoch making discovery, this is decimal system, and he wrote another book called Aryabhatta Siddhanta. This book is about the day-to-day calculations. Today, the Hindu calendar, which is called Panchanka, is based on Aryabhatta's calculations. In memory of his contributions, our first satellite was named after him. This Aryabhatta is Aryabhatta. So next we move on to Varahamihira, the great astronomer of Guptan period. His Pancha Siddhantika is an outstanding book on astronomy, and he wrote Brihat Jatake and Lagu Jatake, it about astrology, and his book Brihat Samhita, it is an encyclopedia of many sciences, you name it, astrology, astronomy, geography, image making, what not, jewelry making, etc. So next important scholar, mathematician is Brahmagupta. He wrote Brahmasputa Siddhanta and Kandakadhyaka, and he showed the importance of zero, and he describes the theory of gravitation. And next, in science and technology, in the field of medicine, Charaka and Shushruta are well-known figures in medicine. They wrote Samhites. Charaka wrote Charaka Samhite. Sushruta wrote Sushruta Samhite. Another important physician, Vagabhatta and Balabhatta both wrote a treatise on medicine. And Vagabhatta, in his book Ashtanga Sangraha, he introduced different medicines. And Dhanvantri, the famous, the Indian, the father of Indian medicine, Ayurveda, his work is about the Indian medicine called Ayurveda Nigandu. And another one important physician, Nagarjuna, he introduced the oxide treatment with different metals like gold, silver, mercury, iron, copper in treating the diseases, and the surgery was well developed during the Guptan period. So he is Charaka. And in the field of chemistry, metallurgy, so the iron pillar Mehroli in Delhi is an example for the great advancement that the Guptan period had achieved in the field of metallurgy. So this pillar has not rusted even to this date. It has surprised even the modern metallurgists as to how it was prepared. And then the coins also tells the metallurgical skill of Guptan people. And when we talk about the progress, we just move on to the progress of art, architecture and sculptures. So first we see the temples. The basic structural features of Indian temple architecture were developed. So the temples were flat roofed and square in shape. The temples which were constructed by the early Guptan rulers were flat roofed and square in shape. And for example, temples at Sanchi, Tigava and Iran, and the temples which were constructed by the later Guptan rulers were also flat roofed, square in shape, but they have a shikara, dome. So for example, Bittergone temple as well as Dashavatara temple. And the main temples, when you talk about the main temples of Guptan period, Dashavatara temple of Devgarh is the first Guptan temple, and the Shiva temple at Bhumara and brick temple of Bittergone. The next will be the Buddhist shrine at Sanchi, Buddhist shrine at Bodh Gaya, and stupas, not only temples, stupas, viharas. Viharas means the temples of learning, and caves, cave temples. Also caves are constructed and they built cave temples. In Ajanta we could see Nasik and Karle. So this Bittergone temple, it is, see the when we talk about the temples, it is mostly it is made of stone, but few temples are made of brick. So Bittergone temple is made of brick. You can notice that. So next we move on to the sculpture part of Guptan period. Sculptures, Guptan sculptures. The sculptures was free from foreign influence. Yes, the image of Gupta, image of Buddha of Guptan period is absolutely independent of the Gandhara art, and it is purely Indianized. You all know Gandhara art is from Kushanas. It is Indian, it is a combination of Indo and Greek art, but the Guptan sculptures, the Buddha images of during Guptan period are free from the Gandhara influence, Gandharan art influence, and emphasis is more on contemplation and devotion. The sculptures, when you see, it will really reflect, it depicts the, what we can say, it depicts the devotion, and also the pose of the sculptures shows the devotion and contemplation, and nudity in sculpture is eliminated, and the figures in sculptures were in drapes. The transparent drapery, the dress is always plain or with folds are used, which reveals the form of the body. And also beautiful curly hair is also one of the features of Guptan sculptures, and a large halo of hair, a large halo behind the face with ornamentation was also one of the feature of Guptan sculptures. And next we move on to the important Guptan sculptures. Standing image of Buddha. It is now kept in the Sarnath Museum, and 7.5 feet height copper statue of Buddha from Sultanganj. Now it is in Birmingham Museum, and several images of Jain Tirthankars were made, and 9 feet high image of Vishnu found near Bharatpur. We could see some of this. See the drape with folds and the halo, the characteristic of Gupta's halo, which is decorated, not plain. And then the curly hair, beautiful curly hair. The expression, it shows the peace, serenity. So these are the important characteristics of Guptan sculpture. See, it is a Vishnu's statue. See the curly hair. So next we move on to the paintings. So in the words of Dr. D.C. Agarwal, he said, the art of painting reached its perfection in the Guptan age, and these paintings are realistic, beautiful, very full of expressions. So for example, we can see mother and child in cave number 17, and dying princess in cave number 16, and paintings on the walls of Bagh near Gwalior. So these are the progress that has happened in the temple architecture, sculpture and paintings. See, this is a painting. See, the colors are so bright, very bright color. See, the yellow is glowing. It belongs to how many centuries back it was done. How nice it is. So we need to talk about the conclusion part of Guptan period as the Golden Age. The greatness of Gupta Empire in different areas of life can be hardly be matched by any other empire in India. And rightly said, Aurobindo has rightly remarked, never in the history has been seen such a many-sided blossoming of her phase in life. And there is one saying, Deva Preeti, they followed Deva Preeti, the people of Guptas followed Deva Preeti, Papa Bhiti and Sangha Niti. Deva Preeti means love for God, Papa Bhiti means fear of sin, and morality in society is Sangha Niti. They followed these three principles. That is why the Guptan period is rightly called as the Golden Age of ancient history. Before we go on to the home assignment section, we can have a lightning revision of what we have dealt in this class about the epithet Guptan Golden Age for the Guptas. So we started with how the Guptan period has got a unique position in the Indian history, and the period from 320 CE to 480 CE, covering the period of Chandragupta I, Samudragupta, Chandragupta II and Kumaragupta and Skandagupta. This period is known as the Golden Age of ancient India, and it is also the period of Renaissance, and it is Guptan period not only carved an extensive empire, but also it brought peace and prosperity to the people, and it resulted in the development of art and architecture, because all the rich people, they parted some of the income to develop this art and literature. So that is how Guptan period got the epithet Golden Age. Next we talked about its all-round development. So every aspect of human life, whether it is social, political, cultural, economic, religious, reached the highest watermark. An all-round development of Indian culture is achieved, especially in the field of mathematics, science, art, literature, architecture, painting, sculptures, and it is compared with Augustus Caesar's period in Rome and Pericles in Greece of 5th century BC and Elizabeth period of 16th century CE, because when we talk about Queen Elizabeth period, that period has got the greatest development in the development of English language and English literature and music, it is compared with that of the play, because the Shakespeare belonged to the Elizabethan period, our Kalidasa also belonged to the Guptan period. So we can easily compare with both the periods. And then Pericles in Greece, it is called the classical age. The classical age means is one in which the literature, art and architecture reached the highest level of excellence. So the Pericles was the greatest ruler of Greece during his period. The Greek culture reached the zenith. So also with Guptan period, it reached the zenith. Culture of Indians reached zenith in the Guptan period. So next we moved on to the points which supports the epithet Golden Age. We first talked about the administration, about the Fahian's comment. So he characterized this Guptan administration as mild and benevolent, no theft. The people were very much peaceful and it looked after the welfare of the people, and the travelers, the roads were kept safe for travelers, and people are not overburdened with tax. And what else? And administration was quite liberal when compared to that of the Mauryan administration. That's how he ends in his account of Buddhist kingdoms. And then we talked about the economic prosperity. They are economically sound because they are engaged in agriculture, industries like silk, cotton textiles, mining for metals, mining for gems, and also they have an internal as well as external trade. External trade to the Western world, especially Roman Empire, and the internal trade as the Ujjain as the commercial center, and so many crafts like ivory carving, jewelry making, weaving also has got its side. And then next we talked about the values they practice in day-to-day life. People live in accordance with the four principles of life, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. And very nice statement was given by Fahian. The gold left on the road could be recovered, nobody could touch it. What a class they have lived, what a high standards, moral standards they have set. So if we also practice like that, definitely our age also become the golden age, the period of the Indian history as well as the period of the world. And then revival of Hinduism we talked about. So it is called the age of Hindu Renaissance. The Guptan rulers are staunch followers of Vishnu. That is why they kept Hinduism as the state religion of Guptas. And then the period marked the synthesis between the old and new ideas. The old Vedic culture, Brahminical, that faith just molded into the Hinduism what we find today. And then the old gods, Varuna, Vayu, Indra, they were all receded to the back, and the new gods like Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara came forefront, and worship of images became popular, and beautiful temples especially for Shiva and Vishnu were built. Vedic rites and sacrifices, yajnas, yagas were done with so much splendor, with enthusiasm by the Guptan kings. And next important feature of the Guptan religion is Bhakti cult. They practiced Vedic rites, they were religious, but they developed also the love for God, Bhakti. So it is shown in Samudragupta's title, Parama Bhagavata. It shows that he has so much love and devotion for Lord Vishnu. And then next we talked about the religious tolerance, very important point which supports the Golden Age epithet. Very liberal in their religious outlook. Never their interest in Hinduism made them religious fanatics. And then as we know, Samudragupta supported a Ceylonese king, permitted him to build a monastery in Bodh Gaya, and he also sent a Buddha statue made of gold and silver, studded with diamonds, gems to the monastery as a gift. And also he employed learned Buddhist scholars like Vasubandhu, Asanga in his court, and 2 Jain councils were held in Vallabhi and Mathura in 313 and 453 CE. And scholars, they have a religious debate and philosophical debate on Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism. They grown together, they lived together, and there is absolutely no religious discrimination during the Guptan period. It's a very nice point to support the Golden Age epithet, religious tolerance. And then we moved on to the development that has taken place in the field of education. So India made a phenomenal progress in the field of education and learning, and several centers higher learning, Nalanda, Takshashila and Saranath, Ajanta, they became world famous. And Nalanda being the biggest of all, handled all branches of knowledge, and Takshila was specialized only in medicine. And the different centers of learning, higher learning, like now called as universities, specialized in particular field, they were set up. So one such as Takshashila, which is specially set up only for medicine, medical college we can call, and Ajanta, which is specialized in the field of art and architecture, and Saranath is specialized in the field of philosophy and religion. So now we can see the Nalanda University, so we could recover some of its remains, and Ujjaini became the center for astronomy. Pataliputra, Vallabhi became the great centers of education. So that is how India had become the great centers for education, and the subjects taught were Puranas, literature, philosophy, arithmetic. How interesting the topics are, astrology and science. And the rulers, they are very much liberal in giving donations in cash, land or anything or kind to develop these institutions. And then we talked about the revival of Sanskrit literature. Sanskrit received encouragement and patronage under the Guptan rulers, and the points we discussed here, Nagari script is replaced by Brahmi script, and classical Sanskrit works have come in the form of epic, lyrics, drama and prose. And then the best of Sanskrit literature available today or have come from the Guptan period. And next we talked about how Guptan, that is Sanskrit, was recognized as the court language, and it also became the literary language of North India. That, and also the knowledge of Sanskrit is a symbol of culture. That is why the Guptan rulers wrote inscriptions in Sanskrit, and also coins also they have inscribed in Sanskrit. And Buddhist philosophers, they wrote their religious scriptures in Sanskrit, and Jain Munis, they were used to Pali and Prakrit only in writing the scriptures, but they also changed over to Sanskrit in accordance with the new trend. And important Sanskrit scholars who wrote their monumental works were Kalidasa, Vishakadatta, Sudraka, Harisena, Bharavi and Basa. And next we talked about the Navaratnas. The Guptan period is very famous for the 9 jewels or Navaratnas, and they are 9 talented men who have excelled in different fields. They adorn the court of Guptas as 9 gems. And who are they? Kalidasa, the poet dramatist, wrote Shakuntala. Amarasimha, lexicographer, he wrote the Sanskrit dictionary called Amarakosha, and Vararuchi, the grammarian, who wrote the commentary called Vyakarana. And the Gatakarpara, the poet, he is also a poet like Kalidasa, he wrote a kavya called Gatakarpara Kavya. And the next Dhanvantri, the father of Indian medicine, who wrote the Ayurveda Nigantu about the Indian medicine called Ayurveda, is a physician. And Varahamir, the great astronomer, who wrote Brihat Samhita, the outstanding book on astronomy. And then Brihat Samhita, and then Shapanaka, the astronomer, who wrote Jyotish Shastra about astrology. And Vethala Bhatta, the magician, who wrote a book on Mantra Shastra. And Shanku. So every field there is a expert. Shanku, architect, who wrote Shilpa Shastra about the sculptures. And then we talked about Mahakavi Kalidasa, how he became a Kalidas, how he became a poet and all that. And he is the greatest Sanskrit poet of all times, and he wrote 3 plays called Malavika Agrimitra, Vikram Orveshya and Abhijna the Shakuntala, and 2 epic poems called Kumara Sambhava and Raghuvamsha, and 2 lyrical poems called Ritu Samhara and Meghaduta. And among all his work, Shakuntala is a masterpiece, and it is one among the 100 best books of the world. And you know, I told one incident that French scholar who read the description of the meeting of that Dushyanta with his son Bharata, he became ecstatic, and he carried the book Abhinya and the Shakuntala on his head. He danced in ecstasy. That is how, that is his imagination is, the Kalidasa's imagination is incomparable. And then we talked about the important scholars who adorned the court other than in the Navaratnas also. Shudraka, Bharavi. Shudraka, he wrote Mirchakitika. It tells about the society of Guptan period. And Bharavi, he wrote Kiratar Juniyam. It is about the conflict between Arjuna and Shiva. and Dandi wrote Dashakumara Charitra and Kavidarshana, and Vishakadatta wrote 2 political dramas. We have already dealt with this in the previous chapters, Mudra Rakshasa and Devichandra Guptam, which gives so many informations to reconstruct the history of Guptans. And then Vishnu Sharma, the famous Panchatantra, was written by him. And then Charaka, he wrote, the physician who wrote the Charaka Samhite. And we talked about the religious literature's revival. So the revival of Hinduism, religious literature also given an impetus. Vedas, which came in the form of writing. Before that, it was just orally transmitted to the students, generations, and it was written, brought to writing, and epics were given. Mahabharata, Ramayana given final touches, and then Manusmriti, the code of Manu, which is revived, and also Brihaspati Smriti, Narada Smriti was composed during this period, and Puranas, what we have, the 18 Puranas, what we have in the present form were composed during the Guptan period. We should be very grateful for them. And Bhagavata Purana. So important Puranas, we have known Matsya Purana, Bhagavata Purana, Vishnu Purana. So and all that. Bhagavad Gita was composed, and Buddhist scholars, Asangan Vasubandhu wrote their scholarly works. And Hitopadesha, Beneficial Advice, the book. It is a compilation, it is compilation of fables with human and animal characters. It incorporates worldly wisdom and advice on political affairs in a very simple language, simple sentences. So this book Hitopadesha has been widely translated. And next we talked about the science achievements in the science and technology. Very brilliant activity went on in the sphere of mathematics, science, astronomy, medicine and metallurgy. So Aryabhatta, the great astronomer and mathematician, belonged to the Gupta period, and he studied in the Nalanda University. We studied about that, and he was appointed as the head of Nalanda University by the Guptan king called Buddhagupta at the age of 23, just 23. And the Aryabhatta is the first astronomer who declared in his book Surya Siddhanta that earth is round and the earth revolves on its axis, and he describes the cause of lunar eclipse and solar eclipse. Solar eclipse is not because of the Rahu eating sun, it is because of the shadow of earth. And also he tells about the moon is dark and it shines because of sunlight. And in his book, and he gives the value of pi, 3.146, which is very close to the modern value of 3.1459. What a great thing. And he describes the decimals as a very epoch-making discovery, the decimal system. And he wrote another book called Aryabhatta Siddhanta. In this book, see, is Aryabhatta Siddhanta. In this book, it tells about the day-to-day life calculations. Our Hindu Panchanga is based on this book, Aryabhatta Siddhanta, because in honoring all his contributions, our first satellite was named in his name after him, Aryabhatta. And next we moved on to the important astronomer Varahamihira and his outstanding book on astronomy, which tells about the 5 astronomical system, Pancha Siddhantika. He wrote another books called Brihat Jataka and Lagu Jataka about astrology also. And his work, Brihat Samhite, it is an encyclopedia of many sciences. You can name it: astrology, geography, image making, jewelry making, what not. So many sciences are incorporated in this book. And then we talked about Brahmagupta, mathematician who showed the importance of zero, and also he describes the theory of gravitation. And his work, Brahmasputa Siddhanta and Khanda Khadyaka. And next we talked about the advancement that has happened in the field of medicine. Important figures, Charaka and Shushruta, who wrote Samhites. Charaka wrote Charaka Samhite and Shushruta wrote Shushruta Samhite, and Vegabhatta and Balabhatta, who wrote treatise on medicine. Especially the Vegabhatta, in his book Ashtanga Shangraga, he introduced different medicines. And Dhanvantri, who is well known as the father of Indian medicine, who wrote a book on Indian medicine called Ayurveda Nigandu. And another important physician called Nagarjuna, who introduced oxide treatment. He developed with the help of metals like mercury, copper, iron, gold, silver for curing diseases like cancer. And then this is Charaka. And then we talked about metallurgy, important development that has happened in the chemistry, metallurgy. So if the finest example we quote here is the iron pillar at Mehroli, which has not rusted even to this date. It has surprised even the modern metallurgists as how they have prepared, as to how they have prepared. And then we talked about the progress in the art, architecture and sculpture. First we talked about the progress in Indian temple architecture. The basic structural designs were developed during Guptans only. So the early Guptan temples were flat roofed and square in shape. Examples of Shiva temples at Tigawa, Iran and Sanchi. And the second, we talked about the later temples which were flat roofed, square in shape, but also they have a shikara or dome. For example, Bittergon temple. And the first temple is Dashavatara temple and Shiva temple. Next one will be important temples are Dig temple of Bittergon and some of the Buddhist shrine at Sanchi, Buddhist shrine at Bodh Gaya, and they also built stupas, viharas, caves and also cave temples in Ajanta and Nasik. Then we moved on to the sculpture part of Guptan art and architecture. So they are free from the foreign influence. So the image of Buddha is free, is independent of the influence of Guptan, what is that, Gandharan school of art. It is purely Indianized and the emphasis is on contemplation and devotion. It is well depicted in the expression as well as the pose of the images done. And then nudity is sculpture is eliminated. The images or the figures in the sculptures were in drapes, were appeared in drapes, and transparent drapery which reveals the form of the body, whether it is plain or with folds. And then other important thing is beautiful curly hair and a large halo behind the face. That also a characteristics of Guptan sculptures. And important Guptan sculptures, Buddha, standing Buddha at Saranath, and copper statue of Buddha in Birmingham Palace, Birmingham Museum, and then Tirthankar's images and Vishnu, so a 9 feet Vishnu image. So and then we have seen some of these samples, curly hair and all that. And then we moved on to the paintings. In the words of D.C. Agarwal, the art of painting reached its perfection during the Guptan period, and also it is realistic and the face is full of expression, very beautiful also. The examples we have given: mother and child in cave 17, dying princess in cave 16, and we concluded with the, so this is a painting of Guptan painting, how nicely it reflects the yellow color. So how bright it is done long back. See, the yellow is so bright. And then we finished with the conclusion that Guptan period, the different areas of life, the greatness can hardly be matched by any other empires in the Indian history. So next we move on to the home assignment section. Name any 2 poets of Guptan period who wrote Brihat Samhite and who is called the father of Indian medicine. The fourth question is being, mention any 2 works of Kalidasa and name any 2 well-known universities of Guptan period. Till we meet again, thank you. Sai Ram.